Hey, what's up everybody? Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 3 of the Metaphysics of Movement. Today I'd like to talk about flexibility and mobility and theory versus application. To get started, before we dive into those things, there's a famous quote from Socrates that's relevant to what I'm going to be talking about. He says, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And what I take away from that is if you live a life without questioning anything, it's going to be a boring, dull life. And you're going to end up staying where you are, not growing, not making any progress with things. Because when you do ask questions, or when you do evaluate or examine things, you're able to take away new meaning and grow from it. There's another cool line from one of my favorite artists. He says, it's a fancy way of saying it, he says, "Inquisitive tendencies result in pedagogical propensities." And it's just a fancy way of saying, if you ask questions, you learn. So as someone who is as curious as they come, those lines and that way of thinking is pretty much the driving force to my whole existence. I can't sit and wonder what's on the other side of that fence without jumping over the fence. And I try to work hard to put myself into positions where I can go out and explore and not be stuck living a life not worth living. So anyway, flexibility and mobility. Two similar things. Flexibility, more people are probably going to be familiar with. What flexibility is, or my definition of it, is the joint's ability to go through, or how far a joint can go through a certain range of motion. How far you can take your joint. How flexible you are. Everyone knows what that means. But flexibility refers to controlled and somewhat simulated situations. So not always real life situations. So flexibility, is how far this arm can go this way, but it's being controlled by this arm. So it's in a simulated situation where I have absolute control of how much pressure or how much I'm going to torque it, whereas mobility is going to be your joint's ability to go through a range of motion with a load, or how competent that joint is going to be in a real life situation, not a simulated one. So there's a difference between slowly moving your arm like this and saying, yeah, it's flexible, it can reach through all that range of motion, and then taking a football or a baseball and whipping it as hard as you can. If you only train flexibility in your approach to exercise, you're more likely to face injury. Your shoulder's going to rip, or you'll have pain and won't be able to throw by the time you turn 30. Whereas if you're working certain mobility exercises, you're taking into account that life happens in 3 dimensions, and it can't be simulated with perfect exercises where they're controlled and confined to one dimension, one plane, rather than incorporating 3-dimensional planes into your exercise. So that's flexibility versus mobility. Theory versus application is very similar. So your theory is going to be the theory of how something is going to work. These two are kind of in regards to learning, when you're learning something. So we're all familiar with theory. Theory is the aspect of it when we're sitting in the classroom from straight out the womb to 18 years old, old to 28 years old, however long we stay in the classroom. When we're sitting in the classroom, that's us learning theories of things. So the classroom is a simulation of the real world. The same way your flexibility is a simulation of a real world scenario upon that joint. So application, again, is going to be applying that theory in a functional real world application. So when we look at the two, theory and application, what I'm not trying to say anything like one is better than the other or one can't exist without the other. I just want to focus on saying that it's a necessary pairing. There's a synergy between the two that is necessary for our learning. When we theorize before we do the application, and it's almost a cycle. Think of it that way. You have, before you go out, before you go and perform something, you come up with a strategy as to how you can accomplish it. And your theory is going to be your guess as to the greatest approach to how you can accomplish that task. Then, so you make half of the loop around that cycle, that's your theory, and then the application is the other half. So you apply all those theories and you see how it works. You make one full rotation around the cycle. So now we're going to re-theorize. We're going to say, hey, this worked, this didn't work. If I do it this way, this might. If I do it this way, I don't think it'll work like this, blah, blah, blah. Then you reapply, and all of a sudden you make another loop around, another complete cycle, revolution. And you keep doing it. And that's what your training is. And the more you apply, reapply and re-theorize, the more fine-tuned your practice gets. And that's a great way to approach it. It's a great way to learn and grow. So, let's see. So, there's walking the walk and there's talking the talk. So, a lot of times we see people that are kind of caught in only one. We get people who are very good. Some people aren't even good at talking the talk, but we get people that are good at talking the talk, and they have a lot of incredible information that they've learned from books, from simulated situations, which isn't to discredit them, but in the context of business, if someone who talks the talk is saying all this stuff, yet they can't walk the walk, it looks horrible for them. So, if you're choosing between two doctors, and one of your doctors is fat, smokes cigarettes, blah, 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 just an unhealthy person, and then you see another doctor who's fit, obviously you're going to gravitate toward the one who's fit, because not only does he talk the talk, but he walks the walk. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean the unhealthy doctor doesn't have incredible information that could help people, but, again, his marketability is going to be a lot less than the doctor who is more balanced. Yeah, so the way that we analyze information is always going to be through referencing multiple data points. So, for example, the way we let's take it this way. If you have, we only recognize things when they change. When you can recognize that something different is happening. If you're moving at 50 miles an hour in a car, that is the new norm. Traveling at 50 miles an hour is the new norm. You don't notice that you're traveling until something changed, until you make a turn and your momentum wants to carry you straight, but you're being forced to go another direction, or until you step on the brake. If you slam on the brake, boom, you didn't notice that you were traveling until that change came about. Or if you're on a single lane road, on a country road driving, and there's no one in front of you, no one behind you, and you're just enjoying your drive, casual, not speeding or anything, and all of a sudden someone zips past you and passes you, you start to think, well, am I driving slow? Could I be driving faster right now? It isn't until you get that certain reference, that second data point, that you can extrapolate information about the first data point. And it's always in relationship to the other data points. So the more data points we have, the more we can pull out, the more examination that we can accomplish. So we do this with information. Telescopes do it with pictures, satellites do it with pictures in outer space, to recognize if something changes far, far away, the relationship between certain data points, and you're able to pick up on patterns. So perceiving patterns is huge, and the same way that we're familiar with doing it for information, I like to do it with people as well. So I like to think of people, or one way I think of people is we are living, dynamic, changing information. And the more people you interact with, the more it presents you with opportunities to perceive patterns. So if I meet someone over here and I get to know them, or I engage in conversation enough to understand their background, and they tell me, my past is like this, this happened, blah, 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 now I'm doing this and that. Okay, boom, I file that in my head, in my memory bank, and then I meet another person on the other side of town, and they say, yeah, this was this way when I grew up, and I had that. Now I've got stuff to cross-reference, and I can see, okay, I start to see a pattern. Because you were raised this way, because your local culture suggests that this is, the best way of life, you grow up this way, and now you behave this way. So the more we leave, not leave, but the more we venture out and see what's on the other side of the fence, the more data points we're putting in to our processors. And if you're curious and you enjoy processing all that information, you can start to see really interesting patterns of why people behave certain ways, and you can really get into some interesting psychology of why life is why life happens in certain ways. Anyway, so the moral of the story here is, don't get caught up in just one aspect of it. Your theories are, there's certain accreditations or credentials for when you accomplish certain feats as far as theory, diplomas, blah, 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 bachelor's, doctorate, master's, blah, 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 all that stuff. But that kind of conditions you so that you can get a job. And a lot of times we see that those simulated classroom scenarios aren't capable of emulating real life situations. So it's so important to get out and experience both ends of the spectrum. You know, take some time, make some time to not just work on your theory. Go and apply it, and then retune that theory and take what you've learned and become a better person and fine-tune your craft. Same thing with your exercise, with your training. Evaluate, you know, take flexibility as your theory, and mobility as your flexibility is your walk, your mobility is your, sorry, other way around. Your flexibility is your talk, your mobility is your walk. So make sure that you're training for real life situations, not just simulated situations. Anyway, that's the gist of what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for tuning in. I also wanted to say one last thing. I wanted to encourage people and invite them to share what they're passionate about. If you're passionate about something, there's pretty much a 100% chance that there's another person in this world who's passionate about it as well. And if you are able to take your experiences and share them with the world, you know, you've got people who might be on the same path as you. They might be further ahead, they might be behind you, they might be, you know, whatever. But if someone who's behind you or up here, if you share something about your experience on your passions, there's a good chance that it could help someone else out. So share your gifts with the world. We're all in it together, and you know, let's make it happen. And yeah, anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care.